Episode 6, Disrupt Leaders. You're welcome to the party. We're going into the 5 don'ts of leadership. Here we are, we're the big boys now, 6 episodes deep. We're going into things that leaders should avoid. What are you most excited for today?
I think it's going to be a really good episode. I think it's going to get into the nitty-gritty of the things, the common pitfalls with a lot of leaders, whether they're new, whether they're experienced, the whole bunch, and then how to counter and how to work through these things and what you should be doing instead. And I just think I'm looking forward to talking through something insightful. It's probably going to be some good stories, probably some terrible jokes. And I live for that sort of thing. And so I'm looking forward to just getting stuck into it. And what I would like to say before we do, if there's anything that you think we've missed, leaders at home, please do drop a comment below. Let us know what you think we've missed, what we could have gone into a little bit more. And then maybe we can talk about that next time as well. All right, Jules. So 5 things, 5 don'ts, 5 do's, being a leader. Number 5 on my list I've got for you right here. Don't be afraid to manage up. Give me your thoughts. Give me your instincts. When you hear that sentence, don't be afraid to manage up. What are you thinking?
It's a really big point for a lot of leaders out there. The amount of times you have meetings with your leader and they tell you something that's really unrealistic and you just stay quiet and you're like, I've got to do this now. And then you go ahead and have to give this messaging to your people and you are not completely bought in on the message as well. It really shows when you go to your people and you might lose some credibility. I think if you don't manage your leader as a leader yourself, you can potentially lose credibility and lose face with your people as well. You just become the yes man, so to speak, or you just keep parroting stuff out. I think it's really good for your credibility, your own career. Forget about even your day-to-day of leadership to manage upwards.
Yeah.
So
I've seen a ton of leaders in the past in various companies that I've worked for, like too afraid to have a conversation with the head honcho. If you're a team leader, there's maybe 1 or 2 levels above you to the contact center manager, and they're too afraid to say hello, let alone go over and be like, hey, you've suggested that we start doing this. I don't think it's going to work for my team. And I've definitely seen leaders take on way too much other responsibility, other additional work outside of what's on their role, because those leaders ask and they're not comfortable enough to say, actually, I've got a lot on my plate right now. And it can really lead to like burnout for you. It can lead to, again, like loss of credibility, like you said, for the team. But it can also really lead to like you setting your team up for failure at the end of the day. Like if you're committing to things that you know your team cannot hit, it's also not doing your team any favors in terms of their career, their development, because it could set this thing, like this view in your senior leader's mind that maybe Jules' team's actually not that good. Maybe those consultants aren't able to hit the numbers. And then it puts them all on the back foot a little bit as well. And so
I think the other thing to remember is as much as senior leaders and much as we as people like to hear things the way we think of things, or we like to hear people say yes to our ideas, what's even better is a person that delivers on the things they promise.
Correct.
Like as much as you can be the yes man and say yes to everything and make them feel good at that moment, but they're going to feel even worse 3 months down the track when the thing that you've said yes to isn't delivered properly or the way they've expected it. So you're better off pushing back then, managing the expectation and delivering on your promises than just derailing the whole thing altogether.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what should you do instead? In my opinion, whenever your leaders come to you, they're looking to set an expectation, and that thing is something that you initially alarm bells go, oh my God, 1, that's a terrible decision, or 2, how the friggin' hell am my team going to be able to hit those numbers? How the hell are we going to do that? How are we going to triple our output in under 2 weeks? Whatever the case may be. My first thought is, and I stole this one directly from Ted Lasso, be curious, not judgmental. Ask a lot of questions, because I think we spoke about this in our previous episode, Diary CEO. Don't immediately disagree and come in being like, no, boss, that's terrible. That's a terrible idea. Worst thing I've ever heard. Because they're going to shut it down immediately, think that you're just maybe not on board, not a team player. And so what we should be looking to do is ask a couple questions. What are they trying to achieve? Why are they trying to achieve it? Where have they got this idea from? Was there a previous team that somewhere else has tried to embed this thing and it's worked really well? Ask a ton of questions to uncover as much information as you can. Because what that does do gives you a bit of a basis to start to set some other expectations back. If they've got no evidence or support, you can maybe provide your own thoughts, feelings, data based off previous experiences, things like that, to create more realistic expectations.
You're correct, Bill, about they're coming with unrealistic expectations. And I think your example there is fantastic. Somebody comes in and goes, hey, I want you to triple or double your output by end of the week or end of the month or something. And you're just sitting there as a leader going, what? Like we're barely holding it together as it is, and you want to double this? You've got to double the bad. This is what's going to happen, is what you're thinking. but you should also be able to understand then, as you said before, you can go to them, ask them for more clarification on where are they getting the data or information, right? In a nice way. Don't like go, I want you to double the output, Bill, and you go, where are you getting this information from? You know what I mean? You probably don't do that. What you should do is probably go, okay, I understand you want to improve our output. Talk me through, how do you think we can achieve that? I think sometimes if you tell them to talk you through a plan, sometimes they might have not planned this correctly. They might have been in a meeting where they were a yes man and then came to you and now trying to put that pressure on you. So you can understand that pretty quickly. And if a person can't give you a solid plan, they start to see the fallacy, so to speak, in their own argument, right? So they come in and go, actually, I can't explain it, how you can do this. That's why I need you to talk through. And I'm like, okay, here's my thinking. We can 100% improve our output by a realistic amount. And this is the realistic amount we can do week on week or by the end of the month, and start to manage some of the expectations. So then they can go and communicate to their higher ups or to their board of directors or whoever they're accountable to from that point, if that makes sense.
And I think the other good positive thing around asking a lot of questions and like trying to find as much information as you can and challenge their way of thinking in the way that you mentioned just before is, if you uncover why they're looking to achieve that thing, you might be able to think of an alternate way of achieving it that doesn't put as much pressure on yourself, put as much pressure on the team. And I think that's just as important. Sometimes I think we fall into a little bit of trap of focusing on what they want done, not why they want it done. And the why is probably more important. If it's something cold, like we need more sales numbers, and it's because we're just not hitting our target, pretty shut and dry. But sometimes when it's like an additional thing that they're looking to have promoted, if it's an additional behavior they want the team to embed, there may be other ways around it that would probably work a little bit smoother for you, the team. And the only way you're going to know that is to ask those questions. And so I think don't fall in the trap, no matter how senior the leader is of asking to, above you, ask them why they're doing those things. The other thing I'd say, and I mentioned this before, people are always afraid to talk to the really big bosses. It's excellent for your career to do, first of all. And two, those people don't mind being asked questions as long as you're not outright being disrespectful or rude. If you're genuinely being inquisitive around what they're trying to achieve, why they want to achieve it, it makes you look so good. And they'll sit there being like, damn, Jules is really switched on. He's really interested and passionate in this idea. He's around the business. He wants us to improve. And it helps you get a clearer understanding of what they're trying to achieve, and it helps them get an understanding of you as a person. And it also lets them know that you understand your area of the business as well. If the senior leader comes to you and they're like, we want you to double your output, and then you go, actually, my people are already at X. I think if we focus on Y, we could probably achieve Z, but I definitely don't think we're going to be able to achieve double. It lets them understand that you actually have a really crystal clear idea of your people, of their results, of their ability. And I think that is very underrated when it comes to your own career progression and your own career growth. What do you think, Jules?
Yeah, I think to summarize that point, leadership has no room for passengers.
I love that.
Leadership
put on a
has
t-shirt.
100%. Another t-shirt worthy comment from the Disrupt Leaders podcast is leadership has no room for passengers. As a leader, if you think you're just got to coast through, you're going to go, first of all, you're not going to go too far, is my honest advice to you. I think you might be able to hang in to the leadership position, maybe. There's plenty of leaders who coast, don't get me wrong. But I think if you want to be a good leader, you cannot be a passenger. And if you definitely want to have career advancement, you can't be a passenger either. You need to be able to drive at certain points and be able to take people on a journey if you're a leader.
Yeah, look, people don't know who Michael Schumacher is because he sat in the passenger seat. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that's it. And look, sometimes it's fine to ride shotgun. Sometimes it's nice, it's comfortable. You get to be a passenger princess. But if you really want to get somewhere in life, you can't afford to be passenger princess all the time. And you've got to go to that next level. All right. I think it's time we get into number 4, which is a very interesting one. It's something that, like, I know in particular you are very hot around, Jules, and that is to not let anarchy reign, to not let your schedule fall all over the place, and just to not fall to everything being ad hoc. Talk to me about it. You're the master of this. I want to hear from you.
Yeah. It's so tempting. And I think especially when I was a new leader, it's so tempting to not plan out certain things. We've spoken about planning before in previous episodes. The point we want to make with this is you can easily be a magpie looking for shinier things all the time. I think as a leader throughout the day, you're like sitting there on Slack or you're looking at things unfold. And if you let that dictate where you spend your time, you will spend on things that don't bring you much value as a leader. Because there's
Correct.
always something that's burning, especially where we're like in a contact center environment where we are. There's always something that's happening, right? Like queues are high or some system's not working, or I don't know, there's something that needs updated or whatever the case is. And you can spend a million hours on all these things and not be able to complete it within the time we've been given. So it's important then to prioritize those things. Are they really important to you? Are they important to your people? Are they important to where you want to get to as well? If they're not important to where you want to get to, can that wait for a Friday afternoon when you're just about to open a few beers to do?
In leadership, lots of things will come up. Your team will always be reaching out to you. They'll always want things from you. And we're definitely not saying ignore that stuff and avoid that stuff. You're there to support your team at the end of the day. The problem is if you're not planning and you're not structuring, other things will get missed. And I think it's really important, as much aspects as you can be controlled. The more control you have, the more structured things will be and the smoother things will go in the right direction. So this comes down to everything. I think first things first, as a do for me, is you do want to be having a routine. If you know there's certain mandatory tasks you have to do, that you've got certain reporting that has to be done, you've got a certain amount of quality management stuff to do potentially, you've got various tasks that you know you've got to get done, make sure that stuff is plotted onto your calendar. Me and Jules mentioned this previously. We would, as a minimum, do it the Friday before the week to come because it lets me outline my entire week and structure everything, making sure that everything has its place so you're not missing those mandatory tasks. The other thing I'd say, it falls down to when we're in, like at a more micro level, coachings, one-on-ones, huddles, team meetings, any meeting that you go to that you'd present to, you should also have a plan. Everything should be structured. I think, in theory, in my opinion, Jules, and I don't know, I'm keen to see if you disagree and agree. For the most part, your team should know where you are. You should be Mr. Consistent. They should know that team meetings where they can be are at 3 o'clock on a Wednesday, or they get one-on-one every fortnight. And in that one-on-one, they should know roughly the structure. Obviously, the way that you have the conversation shouldn't be the same every time. We spoke about this previously. You don't want to be wallpaper. But at the same time, they should know roughly what to expect when they're walking into a coaching session. They should know roughly what to expect with your time, with your schedule, because it helps them understand the flow of where things are going to go. What do you think?
Yeah, I think most people crave some kind of structure. It's funny because we kind of work in a work from home environment now, and there's probably a little bit less structure to most people's work, like post-COVID. But if you ask a lot of people, like having that structure is really helpful. If you know where you need to be and what you need to be doing on a Wednesday afternoon, it's going to help you really dial in on those things. So the other thing as well is around not letting anarchy reign is that if you've got a meeting coming up on Tuesday at 3 o'clock, you can start to plan out how you can make those minutes effective. So like I just spoke about before we started, right? If I got this meeting, I got a huddle on Tuesday. Then you're not going to waste those first 10 minutes trying to bring up your stats up or trying to share screen and it's not working. Or trust me, we've all made these mistakes. These are mistakes that we've all made. It can really make a wet sock off a meeting if you don't kind of prep and come in guns a-blazing. Now, we've spoken about using those first few minutes of a meeting to engage with people, 100%. But it shouldn't be useless either. It can't be just waffling on for the sake of waffling on, and you're coming in just talking about what's happened in the newspapers or something. Like, you really want to be really structured. Go, okay, I'm going to spend a couple of minutes like really engaging with people, getting people on side and bring the special vibes unit spice to the meeting. And then what do I want to do? What do I want to discuss first? What do I think is most important? How will that lead to my next point? When do I get them to ask questions? Do I need to, what questions do I want from them? And then what do I want them to leave the meeting going, okay, these are things we need to do, or these are things we need to submit, or whatever the case is. You really want to plan that out, because otherwise you'll miss out on crucial things. And then having to send them a sneaky little Slack message later goes, by the way, guys, you also need to do this. That's going to get lost in the wash. Going back to again, I know that wallpaper thing really resonated with the two of us, Bill. But like it then becomes that wallpaper thing because you've just made it unimportant. You're saying, oh, I didn't mention it in the meeting, so it's not really that important. You know what I mean? So if you can plan and if you can make the most out of the minutes with your people and your stakeholders, you're going to be the most effective leader. Already, this is one of the things that can really make you stand up above under
Mhm.
leaders in your group?
Yeah, I actually went to a meeting. It was a while ago now. It was a hot minute ago, and it was run by a senior leader, and it was like an interdepartmental meeting. There was like a whole bunch of people going to be there. I think there's probably like 20, 30 leaders across various different departments there. And we roll into the meeting, and the leader's like, I want everyone to go through this number. And it was like a bunch of KPIs that are not readily accessible. It's something you would have to get from 2 or 3 places and work it out and piece it together. And I remember sitting there thinking to myself, like, if you knew we were going through this in this meeting, why did you not let us know beforehand? Because now
Mm.
we're in the meeting right now, and it took 10, 15 minutes before anyone, because there's an open forum. Oh, just wondering if anyone would like to speak to their numbers. No one had their numbers. The meeting only goes to 30 minutes. And I sat there and I'm like, geez, you've got 30 something leaders from the business here. And it's not like we get a lot of time together as is. And this could have been a really productive meeting if everyone had the numbers prepared, understand the vision behind
Yeah.
the meeting. But just that little bit of planning, that little bit of preparation beforehand would have really enabled us to get the absolute maximum out of that 30 minutes. And it's something that's always stuck with me since then. If you're going to need those things pre-meeting, whether it's something you're going to need to pull together yourself, the team need to pull together themselves, the more time, if you can get that done ahead of time, you just save that time to really focus on what's important and get the absolute most out of every single minute. And let's face it, how much time do you really get with your team? If we're honest,
Not enough.
I'm fortunate enough in my department, in my team, that I get 3 huddles a week. They go for 30 minutes. That's the whole team together. And they get a one-on-one every fortnight. Not everyone's even that fortunate. And I'll be honest, I'd kill for twice the time. Twice the time. The things I could do with twice the time, but unfortunately it's not to be. And I understand why from a business perspective, but you've just got to make the most of every second you get together. And I think not planning and not preparing, you're setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah, somebody really quickly to kind of summarize this point a little bit. So another important thing people don't think about is, and you mentioned it before, is that homework before the meeting for the people that are going to be your stakeholders in that meeting as well.
Mhm.
So I actually had this piece of advice earlier this week. Somebody asked me, hey, every time I go for this meeting and I ask people for their opinion, I get crickets. Like they literally have no ideas or they don't give me anything useful. What I've got them to reflect on is, first of all, not everyone is thinking about your problem. Like they're not thinking
Correct.
about it in the middle of the week going, oh, Jules is really struggling with that one thing. I reckon I'm going to write down ideas. If I wake up in the middle of the night at 3 a.m. and I think of that idea for Jules, I'm going to write it down so I can say this meeting. They're not losing any sleep over your problems. So if you want to make your problem their problem in a lot of ways, in a nice way, you want to get them to do some homework before coming in. So one thing I suggested to this person was, why don't you create an agenda and you tell people, hey, so we've got the meeting. I want everyone to come in with at least 2 ideas. 2 ideas minimum. And I think make that an expectation. You can be a little bit harsh as well and go, if they come to the meeting room without a couple of ideas at least, then really ask them, hey, what have you been doing? Essentially, you can manage that in a diplomatic way, but set that expectation. If you want people to come in with ideas, or you want people to provide ideas, you could also give them the space to come up with those ideas. Not everyone's really good at thinking off on the spot. Not everyone's an SME on the subject you're going to be talking about. You need to respect that people sometimes just need to do a bit of homework before coming in, and that's when they're best able to contribute to the conversation. So tell them to do so.
Yeah, absolutely correct. I guarantee you'll still get that one person that's, oh no, they stole my ideas. That person took, I was literally going to say that. I bet you were, homie. But no, it's something, I think you're exactly right. It's something I do a lot whenever I get special guests. I love getting special guests to come, like other departments to come, talk about what they do, talk about their roles, responsibility, to give my people more understanding of what career prospects there are. But I always tell them beforehand, hey, on Friday, we've got this person coming from this department. Think of some questions. What do you want to know about the role? What do you want to do? Because otherwise it gets to the end of the huddle and they sit there and be like, what do I want to know about the role? And then usually it ends up with them emailing me and then me having to email off a bunch of questions to the person because I always think of some eventually. Now, on the subject of planning, I think we've touched on this a fair bit. There's one thing that I think is absolutely crucial, and it is our point number 3. Don't leave the big frog until the end of the day. Now, what I mean by that, you may have heard this cliche before. If you've got to eat a frog every day, eat the frog first thing in the morning. If you've got to eat 2 frogs every day, eat the big frog first, right? And obviously the analogy there is getting to the idea of if you've got something that's really difficult, really challenging, don't leave that to the end of the day and spend all day worrying about it. Get it done first thing in the morning and smash it out. And I think for me, that as a concept is so underrated as a team leader. It's not funny. The prime example I always think of this, and I hear it across every role that I have ever worked at, It gets to a Friday, it gets to 4 p.m., and people still haven't done their mandatory, like, call marking, quality marking, side-by-side observations if they're in retail. Like, they literally leave it till the last minute and then they're doing it. And sometimes they're having to stay behind after work on a Friday and do it. And for me, I just, like, if you just smash that out and got it done, like, that stuff's really useful. And you could have used those observations in all of your coaching sessions you've had this week. Because you've left that to the end because you don't enjoy it, you've missed all the benefit out of doing it. And I think there's a lot of things as a leader we've spoken about. I think as our previous episodes, two ago, it would be episode 4. We spoke about the things that are tough as a leader. It's boring at times. It's really friggin' boring at times. And I think the temptation to leave doing all that boring stuff to the last minute, get it done, get it out the way, get stuck in. What are your thoughts, Jules?
I reckon French people are highly confused right now because they're thinking, we eat frogs all the time. We love it. What are you talking about, Bill?
Or just the legs.
Yeah, just the legs. Yeah, that's true. They don't eat the whole.
I'd love some legs right now, actually. Let's go. Put them on a baguette. Send it.
I agree with you. The mindset I always have with most things that I think I'm going to not like as much, I like to get them out of the way first. I'm definitely a bad news first, good news last kind of guy.
Eat my veggies first, mate, every time. Every time, eat my veggies first, then the meat and potatoes at the end.
100%.
Every roast dinner I ever had.
Yeah, rip that Band-Aid off. You know, I just don't, like, I want to get rid of it. This really resonates with me really well. I always try to get the biggest thing I want to get out of the way done at the start of the day. Even working, like right now, we've got to go 2 days into the office or whatever. I do it at the start of the week because, first of all, it's just what it is. But like also, I like it because it feels like an extra long weekend for me. So Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, it feels like I'm at home, like fantastic. But even with things you're going to hate, if you've got that person that you need to have a conversation with, you're not looking forward to it, book it in the morning. Book it in the morning. Because there's no time like the present to have that conversation. You want to plan for it, obviously, like we just mentioned before. Don't just go, okay, I want to have a conversation with the president and book it in 5 minutes time. But like maybe the first thing the next morning or whatever, because you have that conversation and then you've also got time to embed anything or action anything that are a result of those things as well. Like how often do we have big things going on at work and you have a meeting, it's done and dusted. That's it, guys, let's go home. You know what I mean? Like it's never the case. There's always things to do afterwards. And you don't want to leave that for the end of the week. And the end of the week, end of the day, my goodness, that's the recipe for disaster because come Monday, everyone's forgotten what you've agreed on and life needs to restart again. You've got to have a bunch of unnecessary meetings again. So if you have it early in the week, preferably earlier in the day, you're going to be able to tackle that throughout the day and get it sorted so you can go to bed and not wake up a million times thinking about it.
You make a really excellent point right there at the end, right? The other thing to this, I don't know about you, Jules, the amount of things that I build up in my head as being this big, terrible thing, it's going to be an absolute nightmare. Maybe I've got to deliver some bad news to my boss. Maybe I've got to call an angry complaints customer who I just think it's going to be horrendous. And you put it off, you put it off, you put it off, and then you do it, and there's actually not a problem at all. I vividly remember I made a mistake. When I first started in our current role, like I literally made a mistake and I sat there and I was mortified at this mistake I made and I was having a huge freak out. And I literally for an entire hour spent the time freaking out over this. And then I eventually was like, I've got to tell my boss. And I told him and he's just like, oh, that literally doesn't matter like at all. The weight off my shoulders was like night and day. But I sat there and I was like, man, I literally just spent an hour like feeling physically sick, having all this like anxiety, all this stress over something that was just so quickly resolved. And look, to be honest with you, maybe it won't be that simple. Maybe it will be absolutely terrible. Maybe it will be every bit as bad as you thought it would be. However, to quote Newt's commander from Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, if you worry, you only suffer twice. If it's going to be bad, it's going to be bad anyway, right? The only thing worrying does is compound how bad it is, like the length of it. At least if you get it done the first thing, it's over and done and dusted, and you can put that to bed and move on with the rest of your day. So I think it doesn't matter whether it ends up not being as bad as you thought as it was or more.
It really drives you to the point of one of the do's as a leader is to be accountable. And to be accountable, you want to be transparent about the things that don't work out for you as well. And you want to do it in a timely manner so that you can fix it. Most things, unless you're a doctor or maybe a structural engineer or something, most mistakes you in a corporate setting are reversible to a lot of extents, right? Like to a lot of extents, a lot of things that we do, especially in frontline, mistakes that we make are reversible. It's probably like a little system thing or you've made an error or something. And so with enough trial and error, you can fix it out. Or like it might not be, the repercussions might not be as bad. But even if they are bad, as Bill said, you getting ahead of it can only serve you. If you let it fester and you leave it forever, I can guarantee you, even if it was a small problem to start off, it has now become a big problem because you've let it go. And also your leader now knows, your senior leader, you're waiting for like that moment of ownership, or maybe your people also know you're not a person that can be trusted, I think, as well, to a certain extent. If you've kept something for a week, for instance, and not said anything, and you go and you wait to be called out, I think that'll be even worse than having addressed it the first thing the next morning.
I actually have a bit of a story about this, about exactly that, where I said a very naughty word on a phone call and a customer heard it.
Oh,
Right.
no.
So this is Bill's confession hour, right? So basically, this was back when I worked in insurance. We're going back a couple of years now, and I was on the phones and I was selling insurance. And there was something that I knew I could get approved if I called the underwriters. And so I told the customer, I'm just going to put it on hold, call the underwriters. I get this lady, I'm not going to name her name, but she was known for not being the most useful. Let's just say that, right? She was known for being she didn't quite understand all the time. So I explained what I wanted. She pushed back. She's like, no, we can't do that. And I was like, I know we can't do that. Like I know it's something that I call you guys and you just say yes, because I get this done all the time. And we went round in circles and I explained it 3 or 4 different ways. And she just was not getting it at all.
Yeah.
And so I hung up on her. And at that time, I was just like, sat there so frustrated and out loud. And I won't say the word. Can I say the word, or will we bleep it if I say the word? Or is I just not say it? Excellent. Sure. And I was like, she's such a useless was what I said, right? I said that, right, out loud to no one in particular, just to myself. And at this moment, I heard the customer go, yeah, she was just not quite getting it, was she? And at that point, I felt my soul leave my body. I literally felt the color drain from my face. Because normally what we do is we put the customer on hold and then get a second extension. Turns out that's not what I did. I'd done a conference call. And so the customer heard the entire interaction that he's not supposed to hear of me explaining things to this woman and her not getting it. And then me calling her a useless C, right? And I spat it as well. I didn't say it, like I spat it with venom. She was a useless bang. And yeah, honestly, the second he responded, terrifying. No. But to finish the story off, what I did do, as soon as I hung up on that customer, call my boss. Immediately call my boss and was like, hey, I've done a thing on the phones, just so you know. And I think that's 100% the correct way to respond to that, right? Because if I've gone to him and I'm like, look, mate, I've done this, he knows I know it was wrong. But if he doesn't do that and maybe he listens to the call and finds it, maybe quality management listen to the call and find it, heaven forbid a senior leader decides to listen to the call, finds it, I'm in all kinds of trouble. Whereas at least now if something comes of it, he's, actually already dealt with that. So always get on top of anything like that as well. It's really important. Jules, what's our next point? What have you got as number 2?
Man, I'm just trying to recover from that story. That was the banger. Anyway,
It's probably one of my crowning achievements as a consultant. Yeah.
Number 2 is don't let little pebbles derail big train. So the point around this is that as a leader, you can have little issues with your team or with your stakeholders, or also going back to managing your leader, could be with your manager, but like mainly with your people and your team. You can have little things that happen that can really derail projects that you're working on, or just your team culture or your credibility as a leader. And you really want to address them straight away. And you want to set out a bit of a routine, a track for your people to follow that can keep your work in line. So as much as possible, try to address those little things, and also even difficult personalities. Like if you're seeing people in your team that are coming in, and every team's got this one person who's a little bit negative, who can like really outspoken in meetings, and they might be that's BS. I don't really like that. Or they might be that kind of person. You really want to address some of those things really early. You want to give them a space to have that conversation.
Right.
And I think it's really essential as a leader to allow those people to talk and then address their concerns. I think it shows a really good message to the rest of your people that this is a safe space and complaints are allowed and valid, and it sends another key message on you as a person as well. But
Yeah.
I think it's also important to manage and go through. I think you had a really good tip around this, Bill. If you've got a really
Yeah.
difficult person and you know they're not going to like the messaging, you have a
Mm.
certain way of handling this.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you've got someone like, obviously most teams have one person that's maybe a bit more outspoken, but if you've got someone who's particularly bad or particularly disruptive, I actually think it's a really good idea to tell them beforehand if any changes you think they're not going to like. And I'm
Mm.
not talking like coddling the person. If you've got a meeting at 3 and you're rolling out the change, maybe at 2:50, just pull them aside, tell them the change. Because usually a lot of their like instant concerns and stuff like that, they'll voice to you immediately. And a lot of the time with those kind of people, I know this because I used to be one. Surprise, not surprise. It's just emotional at the time. They instantly react like quite negative, and so they'll voice a lot of their concerns. And usually, sometimes just voicing their concerns is enough for them to self-realize as an issue. But also,
Mm.
it gives you the opportunity to address all of their concerns one-on-one and in that instance without like upsetting the apple cart too much. The
Mm.
positive side of this is, let's say you have that one-on-one conversation beforehand and you do turn that person around, you have that conversation, they understand the vision you're going for. When it comes to the actual delivering the message to the team, them being positive about the message will also make a lot of the team go, dang, like
Yeah.
Phil's getting around this. He's normally the one that complains
Woo.
every change and he's saying this is good. So maybe this is a good idea.
Yeah.
And another thing
Yeah.
you can also do sometimes, if you've got that person that you know is outspoken, I would say usually it comes from a good place. Like usually they
Mm.
just want things to be good for the customers, for themselves, for the fellow staff members. I don't think it's a bad idea to make them like a change champion as well. Try to get them on your side as like you don't roll the changes out. They're partly responsible for rolling the changes out. And I think
Mm.
giving them that little bit of additional responsibility and telling them that you understand where it comes from, lean on them a little bit, will help soften them a ton. What do you think, Jules?
Mate, talking about self-story, right? If you do that and you make them a champion or something that you're looking to change, they probably might react to that as well. Make them a proponent of that change instead. Yeah, can do major things for the direction you're looking to go in. I think another little pebble that can really derail important stuff is you as a leader and how you convey those messages as well. So you got to be careful. I think we spoke about before. If you sometimes don't agree with the change and you come in and go, oh, geez, guys, like, I got to tell you to do this, right? You might not think that's a big thing,
It is.
but it sends a messaging to your team members going, oh, Bill's not a big fan of this, or it's not that important for change. And
Yeah.
they start to, it's everything from there, every message from there. Even if you then have a message later on in the meeting that is going to be really good, they're not going to like really embed it because that meeting becomes a nothing meeting for them already the moment you start that off. So you want to be
Yeah.
really careful when you come in there and go, oh, hey, you want to say, hey guys, so this is what's really important. I think you said it last time, Bill, because this is what's really important to management, or this is really important to the company that we work for. And that's the way you frame it. You don't have to
Correct.
use emotional language to go, oh, I don't really agree with it, whatever. It doesn't really matter, is it, at the moment? It doesn't really matter with it because the change is coming. So
Yeah.
at that point, hopefully you've managed up and you've held some expectation. So at this point, it's not about showing your displeasure on it. It's about making sure your people are on board. And the best way to do that is
Correct.
just spit facts and don't bring
Yeah.
any emotion to that argument as well.
No, you are exactly correct. And I think not to toot my own horn too much, but this is something that I do particularly well. I do embed change with my team very well. I'm very good at selling the vision behind things. It helps if you believe in it, right? If you genuinely believe the change is a good one, go in there and tell your team. I think like most of the things that get changed, if they get changed for my people to make their life easier, it's such an easy sell. We actually had something relatively recently. There was a change to our team where we were like giving our consultants more responsibilities, more tasks they would do on the phone that would come from the higher tier down to the lower tier. And a lot of the higher ups are really concerned about this. And I was like, why? Like people have been crying out for more things to do for ages. They keep saying they're getting a bit bored. They want additional responsibility. This is the easiest sell ever. And it was such a foreign concept to me that we would even perceive it as a problem. I hadn't even considered it, and my team hadn't even considered it was a problem. They loved it. And I think it was more just specifically down to the way that it was communicated. It was communicated as this is a positive change. This is what you've been asking for. This is why we're doing it for you. And it was truthful. Like I'm not going to go and tell my team lies again, because you lose credibility if I start lying to the team. But I think, just sometimes like we lose sight of that a little bit. Let people know of all the positives. Why are you doing these things? Be open, be honest. And I think they'll come to the party real easy with that.
And the other thing is, like, even with like behaviors, we're going back to the behavior thing with your people. If you've got a person that doesn't like coaching, for instance, and they don't turn up on time for your coaching sessions, what I mean on time is a minute or two is fine, but if you're like 10 minutes late all
10
the
minutes.
time and you just
Mm.
notice the behavior, like they happen to take a call every time just 30 seconds before your meeting or before huddles start, they're always a bit late, or they tend to turn up to work late, 20 minutes late or whatever the case is. You're seeing things like that, address them early. Again, those are little behaviors that can compound. And essentially what you're telling them is, I don't think this is that important, so it's okay if you miss it. If you also miss a meeting because someone's been sick or away or something, I think this is something I personally need to get better at as well, rebooking that in. Sometimes you move on, you're 4 days later and, I haven't had that conversation with that person now. Make sure to prioritize your time with your people and make sure you communicate to them that it is a priority. Try not to also move things around too often as well. Like I've had leaders in the past where, like myself,
It was me.
they'll be like they'll have a coaching session with you, and then they'll get moved 1 hour, and then you'll get another message later on in Outlook again. It's moved another half an hour, or it's moved to the next day. Now it's moved to Thursday. Now it's Friday. Now it's 2 weeks from now. And what that tells you is they're not looking forward to that session. So why should I?
Oh, it tells
And
you,
they're
in my
not,
opinion,
they're
it's
not
not important.
prioritizing me. Yeah.
It tells me, in my opinion, that you don't think it's important. I understand you got a lot of meetings, business, blah, 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 but you are telling me that my time, my development is not important. And as much as we manage upwards, me personally, I am ruthless with that sort of thing. Like I won't even hint it. I'll just literally DM my leader and just be like, so I'm not that important. What's going on here? Why am I getting stuffed around? I don't know. It's something, it's a real bugbear of mine, that one. Once is fine, twice at a push, right? And that should not be all the time. If it's happening 2 or 3 times every single time you have a one-on-one, in my opinion, you have to call that behavior out. It's not on a list of do's, but you do need to prioritize yourself sometimes, and you do need to make sure that you are getting the support and development that you need.
Yeah. The only time I've been okay with it tells you all you need to know. The only time I've been okay with my leaders pushing forward, pushing out meetings and stuff with me is when I don't get much value from my interactions with them. So
That tells you all you need to know, right? Yeah.
Look, I'm like, I don't know, whatever, dude. I really don't get much out of that conversation anyway. So I'm happy to spend that half an hour doing something that brings value to me. So that's the only time I won't mind having this conversation, which tells you about the leader. So.
Yeah, absolutely, it does. I think one last I do around this when it comes to those little pebbles and stuff, it is really important to manage the team vibe, manage the team culture, make sure people are feeling empowered, make sure people are feeling listened to. I think you touched on it a little bit earlier. If you're in that meeting and that one person that was always very outspoken, if you do just shut them down every time, the rest of the team will very quickly turn on that and be like, damn, if he's not allowed to talk, I'm not allowed to talk. We're being suppressed. And you find very quickly that once the team start to feel that way, morale goes down, performance will follow. Guaranteed every time. Really important to make sure that you are engaging the team, listening to the team, doing fun things every now and then. I know we're busy and I know that we've got things that we have to talk about every meeting, but you're trying to tell me you can't find 10, 15 minutes for a quick game of Scribblio or like a Kahoot or something like that, a quick quiz. I'm just not buying it at all. Sometimes you could do those games in the team chat. I know I've seen other leaders before. It's something I don't do maybe well enough, is just throughout the day, have a game. Could be anything. Just a GIF, respond with a GIF around this, something that's fun, like the question. It could be a question, you have to respond with a GIF, stuff like that I've seen before in Slack. I think it's really important to focus on that sort of stuff, which does very nicely segue when we're talking about our staff into our final one of our don'ts, and that is do not treat your staff as a commodity. They are not an expense. They are not a resource. What you should be doing instead is treating them as an asset. They appreciate and value the more time you put into them. Now, I said this to you before, Jules, and I think you like this one, a bit of an analogy. I have seen a lot of senior leaders treat staff like owning a car, right? Like you spend money on it. It's a thing that you own. It gets you from A to B. Ultimately, it costs you money to keep it running. Whereas in actuality, I think you should more treat staff as like owning a house. The more time and effort you spend on the house, the more value it's going to bring to you. And it is true. If you spend money, you renovate the kitchen, you renovate the garden, whatever, you make it look nicer, the house is worth more. And in the same instance, if you spend a lot of time empowering your people, you put time, effort into developing their their soft skills, you make them feel encouraged and rewarded, their performance will improve and will be better. And then they benefit and you benefit. What do you think of my knowledge, Jules? Talk me through it.
Mate, I love it, because what do rich people do? They build assets that then bring in revenue, right? So as a leader, no better way to be rich in terms of your leadership capability than to build people that will become assets and then provide revenue in terms of their culture, in terms of what their output for the business, for you, for
Yeah.
themselves, there's no better way to do that. So I love that analogy in terms of you treating them like a house. The other thing is, I've said this time and time again, it's really close to my heart because I've experienced being treated as a commodity. I've experienced leaders that treat you like family and treat you really well and develop you and grow you. And the leaders that stick in my mind are the second type. The leaders that have
Yeah.
really shaped what I want to be as a leader and shape the person I am today are those leaders that spend the time to understand you, develop you, grow you.
Mm.
And they're the ones that at the end of the day will get my respect 100% of the time. They'll get my time 100% of the time as well. And so you want to be that leader where people go, geez, because Bill is asking me, I'll do it. I might not even agree with this thing, but Bill's asking me. So, man,
Yeah.
and that's the kind of leader I think we should all aspire to be. And you start by understanding of people, connecting with them, and not thinking of it as we hear it all the time, even if they don't say commodity, even if they don't say resource. A lot of businesses call people FTE. We've got 10 FTE, we've got 2 FTE, whatever. Not an FTE, mate. Like they're human beings with like problems and things that you need to solve. And so you
Yeah.
need to understand those people. I get it. For a resourcing perspective, like people in workforce planning or people who are business analysts, they might look at people that way because it's easy for them to be binary with the way they analyze their work. But we're
Mm.
leaders. We're a different breed. I think you've chosen to be a leader or a coach. You're a different breed of human being. You should view yourself differently. And so the
Mm.
story you should tell yourself is, yes, they might come to me and call these people FTE, but it's important to me then to bring their stories to life. So if somebody's coming and saying, hey, can this person work overtime, but they're a mum of 5 and that Friday
Mm.
nights is the only time they get to take their kids to basketball, right?
Yeah.
You need to be able to communicate that story with the people that are coming to you
Mm.
and treating them like a commodity. Because they might come to
Correct.
they'll come, workforce planning analysts or senior
Mm.
leaders might come to you and go, oh, can you, we need to fill these 2 gaps because we got overtime, we've got all these like things that are happening, like
Mm.
queues are blowing out or whatever. You need to be able to go like 100%. I'll ask the team, but these are the individuals that might not be able to do it because of X, Y, Z, and be able to communicate their story again with the managing up, but also you're not treating your people as commodities at that moment as well.
Yeah, correct. And I think as far as like your time goes as a leader, right? One of the key things you should be doing as a leader is thinking about how you can use your time to support and boost your people. Like with my time today, I've got 8 hours locked in today. What is the most bang for buck I can do to help my people achieve and be all that they want to be? And that would be stuff like coaching sessions. And sometimes you might have to fight for your people a little bit. There'll be times when maybe you want to pull someone off the phone to have a really good 30-minute conversation because something's cropped up in calls you've been listening to. And workforce planning are trying to tell you, no, we're a little busy. Is one person off the phones for 30 minutes worth the impact of all of the potential benefit they could have by you being able to spend a proper 30-minute coaching session working off something you've got a specific example for that came up, literally, maybe it's a call they took that morning, quite fresh in their minds, like the bang for buck you can have with that. Sure, we may, like that one resource down, one FTE down for 30 minutes, but the FTE we have on the phone afterwards is far more valuable to the business. And I think when you do invest in your people, really invest in your people, really put your time, effort, energy, heart, and soul into helping uplift those people, again, everybody benefits. They will absolutely benefit. They will be better for it, whether they stay within the business, whether they eventually leave the business or whatever. You'll be able to sit there with that satisfaction of knowing that you helped them achieve that sort of thing. And the business they'll perform better, so the business will be happy in the long run. You know what I mean? And we talk a lot about the champagne of victory. I talk all the time about coaching and stuff being the champagne of victory. But I tell you now, as a leader, there is nothing better. There is no single thing better than one of your employees from down the line that you used to manage reaching out to you saying thank you. It was probably about 2 months ago, I received a post, one of my old team. I hadn't managed this person in probably 8 years, and she sent me a thing, and it was like, send this to a manager that helped you do something, blah, 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 Bill, you could be, whatever that, to the tune of it was. But to me, it meant the absolute world to receive that from someone I haven't spoken to in 7 or 8 years. Like, that is the champagne of victory. That is why I do what I do. And that is why we love being leaders. That's why we wake up in the morning. And I think it shouldn't be, the fact that we even have to put it on a list is staggering to me. The fact that we even have to sit here and tell people, invest in your people. And I don't know, there'll be so many of you that are listening to this right now that'll be in a workplace and you'll have a senior leader that maybe won't have that ideal. And then once you start to do it and you start to live that way and really focus on people first and investing as much as you can, it becomes mind-blowing that others do not. In my opinion, it is so confronting when you sit there and you're just like, how are these people not doing coaching sessions? Like, how are these people not supporting their team? Like, from a selfish perspective of how much I enjoy it, it blows my mind, let alone all the dividends that it pays.
Yeah, and there's a couple of things I want to draw on from this point you just said, Bill. So the first thing is one thing I hate. I'm not going to even use the word bugbear here. The one thing I hate is in companies I've been in, the amount of times when, shit hits the fan, they take
Cancel
away coaching
sessions
and people times. Yes. Oh my
loathe
gosh.
is the
When
word
that
I've used for this. It's not
happens,
even hate. I loathe it.
yeah, I can't even. So the thing is, when that happens, you are sending a clear message to you. You do not matter. You do not matter. When the chips are down, we will forget you in a heartbeat. And you've got to be very certain when you're doing that kind of stuff that, like, you want to either have a contingency plan to have the people time as soon as possible. I understand there's going to be days, maybe, when that Microsoft outage thing happened, like you can't physically connect with someone because your computer's not working, that kind of stuff. I get that. You need to then schedule right away. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If it's,
when are we going to make it up?
Yeah, more than a couple of days, you need to make it very clear, and the messaging needs to be that you are very important to us. We just physically can't do it at the moment. Like, let's do it here. But I still, I'll be very hesitant. I think there'll be 1 in 1,000 situations where that will be the case. I'll be honest with you. Yeah. Most of the time, it's just because queues are a little bit higher. Don't make people pay the price just because you don't have the adequate resources to manage your business.
On that subject, just really quickly, I just want to, I can't name the company I used to work for. I used to work for quite a large insurance company. And this is a bit of a positive thing. Do you remember the fires, the really bad fires? ScoMo went off to Hawaii. One thing that I'll never forget, and I always appreciate at that time, as a business, we were drowning. I didn't work in claims or anything. I worked in like a sales service area, and I was on the phones, and we were getting drilled. We were so busy. We're actually so busy, the business ended up having to pay massive fines to the partners because we weren't achieving certain service levels. And one thing I will always appreciate about that business is the senior leaders were like, I do not care how busy we are not taking time away from our people. We still had our huddles on a regular schedule. We had one-on-ones on our regular schedule. We had our team meetings on a regular schedule. And it was like the single worst event in history, the single busiest, that if they've ever wanted to pull it with an excuse, like I'm talking the fines were like hundreds of thousands of dollars for breach of contract. Did not care. People got their time. And for me as a leader, this was before I was a leader, the second time, it just always stood out to me as that is the standard for success. It should never be any less than that, I don't think.
Yeah, 100%. I think people who do that, A, don't know how to lead or coach. B, don't really value that. I think you should take it as the message. I don't really care what they think their messaging is when they do that. Personally, I'm telling you right now, if you're a leader or a person and that happens to you, you should take it as you're not important. You 100% think of you as a commodity. And the kind of underpoint around that is not treating people commodity. I've got a story to add around that. So one of my experiences, I used to work in, again, a branch environment for a large bank. And one of my first managers I had, she was fantastic. I remember a customer, I was doing a telling role, it was quite junior, I was telling, and then I was sitting up there, and this guy was just like, he was a local underworld character, let's put it that way. So he was scary already, like I was already like pissing my pants when he walked up, because everyone knew who this guy was. Anyway, so I asked him for ID, just as like, it was just a part of our process. We could ask for ID whenever like people are depositing large amounts of cash. And he just went off, like he just absolutely went off. He was like going crazy at me. My manager, who was sitting in the office, opened the door. This lady is not very tall. Like she's probably, I don't know, 5'5" or something. And this guy's 6 foot, like 5. He's bald, tats. You know what I mean? He's like very imposing, scary person. She walked right up to him. I was like, hey, don't you talk to my people that way. They're people, they're human beings. She went on a massive rant to this guy, right? Like he's only doing his job. Like, I'll back this guy anytime. That's our process. If you've got a problem with it, go elsewhere. I don't want your cash. And Lily started packing up this guy's cash to give it back to him. I was like, oh my God,
what a
G. I'm going to get stabbed. I was like, we're going to get stabbed. And she was like that decisive and had my back. He changes like tone straight away and it's like, oh, I'm really sorry. I just don't like when people are like, well, it was like, oh, too bad. That's a positive. Eventually he gave me his ID. We went to the thing. But that situation always stuck in my mind because she had my back in a very stressful situation. And she could have easily been like, oh, I'm a woman and I'm not very tall, whatever. And these guys are quite imposing. And he had every reason to stay in the office and let me handle that I'm a bigger guy as well. So she would have been fine with it. But the fact that she did that, dude, I had so much more respect for this person. She didn't treat me as just a resource and didn't do the, oh, customer's always right mantra that some people always have. If your customer is being an absolute a-hole, they're being an a-hole. It's fine.
You know
for
the full sentence to that
conversation. Asshole. Yeah.
Man, you know the whole thing around the customer's always right? The actual saying is the customer is always right in matters of taste. Effectively, it's a sales technique. Oh, you just agree with whatever the customer says to sell them things. And yet people hold on to it like the customer is actually always right. They are literally not. I would say the customer is more often than not wrong, unfortunately.
Yeah. I'm sorry, but you did training on this particular thing. I'm sorry, did you go through 3 months of training right now to do this job? Oh, you did you?
I did. Yeah, I say it all the time, actually, the amount of times that like when people report issues or dramas and stuff like that, and it's, I've done all these 10 things, I've gone through all this back stuff, and it's like, are you sure the customer's not just entering the wrong password? Oh, no, the customer said they're not. And I say this all the time, if you hear hooves, think horses, not zebras. Is the likelihood that our system is completely broken for that one customer only, or is it more likely they just didn't remember their password correctly?
Yeah. 100%.
Customer's always wrong.
I think... Yeah, 100%. Once again, like t-shirt worthy. Like, I would promise you one day, guys. Just pray to all of you. Yeah, pray to all of you. Make us big. Don't let us fail. You will have t-shirts. They'll be creative, and you can wear to work. That'll disrupt, at the very minimum, start conversations with the people around you, because that's what we'll aim to put out. But yeah, I think those are 5 points. Once again, I'll quickly go through them. Yep. So in terms of importance, from 5 to 1. Number 5 was don't be afraid to manage up. So manage your leaders, your seniors around you. Then after that was don't let anarchy reign. So make sure you plan, make sure you're prepped and ready to go for your meetings and your week. And then number 3 was don't leave the big frogs for the end of the day. So don't leave the big frogs for the end of the day. Number 2 was don't let little pebbles derail big trains. And number 1 was don't treat your people or your employees as a commodity. Those are the big 5 don'ts as a leader. As Bill said at the start of it, for those who've watched this, we first of all appreciate you watching this. Please put in some comments around, you might have even seen examples of these. Like, we've shared our stories, obviously. I'm sure there's tons of stories out there of how people have done these don'ts, and you can share those in the comments. Also, what are the things that you think we missed? What do you think, like, you've seen a leader do, or you do yourself, or I've done it yourself, and you go, geez, I regret doing that? Share that. Through that, people can read the comments and go, geez, yeah, I'll definitely avoid that next time. I think you can teach people through sharing your experiences like we are, and maybe we can highlight some of these things in another episode as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, just one last thing from me. Obviously, this list isn't exclusive. There's lots of other things you probably should and shouldn't do. But I think if you follow those 5 things, if you really stick to not doing those 5 things, you will genuinely put yourself above 80-90% of other leaders out there. It shouldn't. A lot of those things seem simple, but they're so easy to miss, so easy not to do. As always, I hope you've enjoyed our episode today. If you did, please do drop a subscribe. It helps us out an absolute ton. You cannot imagine how much. Plus, the more you do that, again, the more chance of t-shirts. But for now, we've been Disrupt Leaders. Thank you very much.